Hi there, happy Friday. It's Melissa with Childproof Parenting, and I wanted to just check in with you this week and talk a little bit about anxiety, specifically in children, obviously, because it's been a hot topic here at Childproof Parenting this week. Many of you had the opportunity to join me and Karen Young for our webinar together, Empowering Kids and Understanding Their Anxiety, but some of you missed it. And so I wanted to make sure I checked in with you, that I answered any new questions that came up after the webinar, and also make sure that if you missed it, you get access to it, because that webinar is only going to be available for the next 2 days. So over the weekend, you have the opportunity to watch the webinar, and it was really kind of an interview of Karen Young. And if you don't know who Karen Young is, she is a psychologist in Australia. She is the founder of Hey Segment, which is a really popular website for parents, and she also wrote the book Hey Warrior. Actually, I've got my own copy of Hey Warrior right here. Amazing book, amazing book. I think all kids, even if they don't have a diagnosis of anxiety, even if they just get nervous or anxious sometimes, this book is incredible. So just want to make sure, because we didn't have a lot of time at the end of the webinar to chat, make sure that I made myself available today to chat with you about it. So I'm just going to share a few of the points that Karen made. That way, if it sounds interesting to you and you can relate to it, you can go ahead and check it out. So she talked about childhood anxiety and how it can look different. Anxiety can look different for kids than it does adults. And many times, anxiety gets displayed in their behavior. So a lot of those meltdowns and tantrums can be the result of anxiety. And there's obviously fearfulness and many times avoidance, because kids don't have control over what they're going to do or where they're going to go. And some of the things that they might have to do make them anxious. So just thinking about noticing your child's behavior and being a detective and really asking what's driving it. It might not be that they don't want to go to soccer. It may be that they get anxious when the coach yells at them. So I think being a detective is really, really important. I think one thing that Karen talked about on our webinar, which I think was really interesting, was about the brain. And she talks about this in the Hey Warrior book, and kind of makes it a very easy way to explain what's going on with your child when they're experiencing anxiety or an anxiety attack, and talking about the brain and how it's just working really, really hard to protect you, that there actually is your friend. Many times kids see feeling anxious and having anxiety as a very negative thing, and I think it can be reframed as a very positive thing. It's your brain trying to protect you, but it's working too hard. It's not realistic, and a lot of it is because our reptilian brain, or our caveman brain, the small little amygdala in the back of our brain, is kind of the core of emotions, and that's where that fight or flight knee-jerk response exists, and that's what's going on with your kiddo. So I think talking to your kid about their brain and how it's working super hard. In her book, the anxiety is the warrior. The warrior is there to protect the child. So I think really simplifying. I love this book because it just has really sweet pictures, and really almost creates a calming effect when you're talking about anxiety. So understanding what's going on in the brain, and sometimes kids just knowing why they feel the way they do can feel really empowering to them. And I think that is a big piece of what Karen's message was, and what comes up in the book, is that we need to empower kids to understand their anxiety, but also know what to do when they're feeling anxious or they feel an anxiety attack coming on. So she talked a little bit about breathing techniques, and I use the analogy of blowing on a hot bowl of soup. she called it hot cocoa. So whatever your child enjoys, hot cocoa or hot soup is a great technique. She also talked about doing a figure eight, and I'm going to let you watch the webinar while she explains the figure eight, but you're actually practicing with your child and physically making an 8 on their hand. So there's some touch involved there, and it's something that you can practice with your child and then they can do later at another time. And she also talked about reminding kids that even though they might feel scared, that they can still be brave. And using some of these techniques allows them to be brave and manage their own feelings and emotions in that moment. But I think most importantly, I kind of gone backwards here, is when your child's feeling anxious, the thing that you can do that's the most powerful and important is acknowledge them, acknowledge what's going on, empathize. I talk about empathy all the time. It's kind of like beating a dead horse here, but empathy, allowing them to know, I hear you, I understand you, first and foremost, because many times parents want their child to feel better. So instead we focus on, you're okay, you're fine, it's gonna go away. And that can feel really dismissive, and that many times will increase the feelings of anxiety because I can't really tell you how I'm feeling as a child. And so I'm acting it out, and many children use their behavior as a form of communication. So just that acknowledgement and that empathy can really help a child cope with their feelings of anxiety. So she talked a little bit about different breathing techniques. She talked about the acknowledgement. She talked about mindfulness practices. One thing that I added onto that mindfulness practices, especially for those of you that have never used it or don't know how to use it, is using an app or a guide. So I use mindfulness all the time in my life, but I don't do it on my own. I have several different apps. I have my own app that I use, which is called Positivity, but I have an app that I use with my children as well, and it's called Mind Yeti. And I've talked a little bit about Mind Yeti before because I think it's amazing, and I actually have the privilege and the honor to give those who enroll in the Childproof Parenting course a 6-month membership to Mind Yeti. So a premier membership. So if you're interested in the course, just FYI, if you buy it in the next 48 hours while this webinar is still available to view, you can get that special bonus, which has a $60 value, which is pretty amazing. So just want to make sure that if mindfulness is something you want to adopt, and it doesn't mean your child doesn't have to be anxious to use mindfulness. It can be helpful when kids need help focusing, calming down, going to sleep, eating. Like there's so many gratitude. I love the gratitude mindfulness practices. So there's lots of ways to use mindfulness in your life to enhance your relationship with your child and your child's ability to cope and calm down and be focused as well. So wanted to throw that out there. And you know what, I'm going to include a link to the webinar that Karen and I did together, and that has information about the Mind Yeti app that you can get for free if you choose to sign up. So I just want to make sure that I showed up today and had the opportunity to just check in with you, let you know what we talked about during the webinar, make sure I answered any questions. And I didn't get any direct questions after the webinar. We did get questions live during the webinar, and unfortunately the chat box is no longer there, so you can't see the questions, but we do address the questions, and many of them are questions that most parents can relate to. So just know that questions were answered, and if something comes up and you have a burning question, please post it here and I will make sure I personally answer it, and I will also ask Karen to respond as well. So we're happy to continue to support you as you learn more about childhood anxiety and how to support anxiety. And we talked a little bit about kids anxious going to a no school. We talked about kids being anxious about practicing piano. We talked about kids being anxious around friendships and being left out. So there's anxiety around a lot of things. Your child doesn't have to have a diagnosis to experience anxiety. I think we all have had anxiety at one point or another. So I think the tools and the information that she shares is super helpful. So go ahead and check that out. I'm going to include the link here so you can register to get a copy of the replay and check it out, and then also access to the Mind Yeti app if you want to get that. I also want to mention, just FYI, I've got 2 webinars coming up next week that I'd love for you to join me for. It's the same webinar, I'm just doing it twice, so that way people that work can see it in the evening and people on the other side of the world can see it at a time that works for them. So Monday night at 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, Parenting with Confidence, How to Avoid Power Struggles. And what's the other? Wednesday, I'm doing it at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's the same one. Parenting with Confidence, Preventing Power Struggle. So we're going to talk about specific tools to help you avoid some of the big challenges that probably come up day in and day out in your home. So please join me. That's a free webinar. All you have to do is sign up. And if you have questions, please leave those questions for me, because I want to make sure I answer those on the webinar. It's the easiest one to do on the webinar, so you and I can have kind of a back and forth, and I can get more information for you so I can give you best possible answer. All right, well, that's it for today. I just wanted to check in with all of you because this is a big topic. I feel really passionate about it, and I love the work that Karen Young is doing at Hey Sigmund. So check out the book Hey Warrior, and feel free to browse Hey Sigmund. She's got a lot of information. You'll notice that a bunch of my articles are there as well. So there may be a few there that look familiar to you. And I will plan on seeing you next week. I do want to let you know next week too, I will be answering any last burning questions. The Childproof Parenting course is closing enrollment on May 1st. So about a week from now, we'll be closing enrollment, and the course will be launching on May 2nd. It'll be a live course for the first 6 weeks, and then everybody has lifetime access, so they can do any of it, all of it, multiple times, or for the first time at any point that works for them. But I want to make sure I'm going to do a Q&A here next week on Facebook Live, so that way if you have any questions you want to chat with me about the program, if it works for your family, what's covered, anything that could possibly come up, I'm gonna be here to answer those questions for you. All right, everybody, have a fabulous weekend. It's beautiful here in Seattle. It's sunny right now, so I'm gonna try my best to get outside and enjoy this beautiful day. Take care, have a great weekend. Bye.